Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So we actually got a halfway decent day today here in Northeast Ohio. Sun finally came out. I actually was able to even wash my truck in the beginning of February. It's still kind of cold, but nonetheless, nice enough that I thought I would go ahead and roll one of the bikes outside. So today I want to make a video talking about my V2 here and everything that I don't like about this bike. So let's get started, see what you think. All right guys, so first things first, let's get the inevitable out of the way. The cost of this bike, when I bought it, I paid $21,000 for this bike, and I paid about $4,900 for the exhaust, and then I installed it myself. But out the door, I was at about $2,000 in sales tax, $21,000 for the bike, let's say $5,000 for the exhaust. This bike has now gone up even more. The bike went up $1,400, and the exhaust, I believe it used to be $5,500. It is now $6,500. So if you want to get this bike with the full Krapovich exhaust, now you're looking at, $22,500 and $65,000. What is that? $29,000 for this motorcycle. The cost is just kind of absurd at this point. You could get a lot more bike for the money. Now, I think this bike is absolutely top tier, and it is a phenomenal motorcycle. And I'll make a good video, I think, here in the future about all the things I do love about this bike. But yeah, you can't ignore the fact that this is only a 160 horsepower motorcycle. That by the time you're all said and done out the door, you're probably looking at a little over $30,000, right around $30,000 now. And then also, insurance on this bike is definitely not cheap either. I'll be 25 in May, so I did buy this bike before I'm 25, which I know is kind of an important mark for insurance. But I paid about $1,900 for 12 months for this bike, which isn't horrendous, I guess, for what it is in my age. But it certainly is not cheap to insure either. And if you plan on having somebody else do your maintenance for you on this bike, a Ducati tech at a dealer, you're going to be looking at some pretty hefty maintenance costs as well with this bike. Now, I take care of my own bikes. I do my own maintenance and stuff like that, so I don't worry about that. I really enjoy working on these bikes. But yeah, overall, just the cost of getting into this bike, and this is still ultimately the entry-level Panigale, even though it's blinged out. It's still the entry-level Panigale. So it's a pretty high barrier to get into this bike, unfortunately. But it has my heart, so it's worth it, I guess, anyway. But yeah, that's the first thing. Not so hot. All right, guys, so the next thing I don't love about this bike is you really don't have a whole lot of wind protection. As you can see, the bike is very skinny, which is nice. But you've got a really short windscreen here, and it really doesn't give you that much of a bubble when you're on the bike. And I'll go ahead and put a picture of me. I got a good picture from a photographer where I was hard under braking, and it really looks like I'm trying to force myself, just like squeeze onto the bike. I look really big on the bike, and I mean, at first I thought, when I first bought this bike, oh, it's so skinny and comfortable. I didn't know any better because this is my first real sport bike. But then I got my V4 that's hiding in the garage over there, and I was like, oh God, I used to think it was so wide, and now it all makes sense. And yeah, I actually wish it did have a little bit wider fairings, because the bubble on the V4 is just so much better on the V4 than the V2. As you can see, you got a pretty narrow cockpit here. Really small windscreen. I wish the windscreen was just a little bit bigger. But yeah, that's another, I guess it's not necessarily a gripe. It's just older Panigale design. That's all it is. But yeah, that's another thing I don't like. All right, so something else I'm really not a fan of is the shape of the tank. Particularly how the tank is quite flat right here, and then right in this section, it takes a hard curve in, and it's kind of stubby and short. Now, again, this is kind of like I've been spoiled by the V4 now, but I did even notice, on the racetrack all last year, when you squeeze the tank hard, and this doesn't really matter if you're on the track or if you're on the street, whatever. This bike's brakes are stupid. The engine braking is insane. You're going to be squeezing the gas tank really, really hard. And this bulge it's not ideal. You find yourself your only part of your contact patch with your leg on the gas tank is actually right here, unless you really scoot forward on the tank, and then the inside of your legs will kind of grab on the front part of the tank. But the tank shape is definitely not my favorite. And again, that's one of those things where it's like, oh, first sport bike, this is just what it's like, whatever. Then I got my V4 and I was like, oh my God. It is so much better. But yeah, that's one thing. I wish maybe if they update the V2, they give it a better tank shape, because this tank shape is not my favorite. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the rear sets and foot position and all that. And also these heel guards. I really hate them. They're just way too low and kind of far forward. Now, of course, that's rider dependent a little bit too, but nonetheless, I found myself having a really hard time with them at the racetrack. Just getting a comfortable body position once I really started to progress as a track day rider, and as I moved into advance and I was trying to get further off the side of the bike, they just weren't helpful. And I really do need to put a set of rear sets on this bike. And also the heel guard, as you can see, it does kind of stick out a little far. And what I would find myself doing is I could not get off. Again, it's one of those things where I could not get off the side of the bike as far as I want to. Anyway, sorry, I just got something in my eye. Anyway, my toes would stick out really far because the inside of my boot would end up pushing against that heel guard. And, you know, again, it could be fault of my own, all that stuff. But nonetheless, I found myself dragging boots, you know, when I was at a really high lean angle sometimes. And I can put a picture up on here of my toe sliders on my boots are pretty chewed up. Just because those heel guards just kept kicking my feet out. So yeah, definitely if you plan on tracking a V2, get rid of this garbage. I'm going to be working on that soon here. Not my favorite. Now, the next thing that I wish was different on the V2 here is I wish the gearing was a little bit taller. I found myself a lot on the racetrack where I would basically just have to either choose between doing a really uncomfortable upshift or just basically coming out of a corner and just holding on to the rev limiter essentially, because I'm going to another corner so soon that upshifting to downshift is just way too much work. And maybe I'll get better at that the more experience I get on the racetrack. But nonetheless, I wish that, you know, I think first gear ends at about 64, second gear ends at about 86, and then third gear is about 96, 98. So, you know, I wish maybe if each gear was just a couple miles an hour taller. Now, of course, I know that I could change the rear sprocket. I could drop that down a tooth or two or something like that. But then I kind of, you know, I'm going to end up losing a little bit of that grunt that this thing's got. I really like the way the power comes on. I like the sprocket setup. I just wish the transmission gears were just a hair bit longer. Not a big deal on the street. They're freaking awesome. Perfect gearing for the street, I would say. But yeah, the gears, you find yourself banging on the rev limiter a lot with these gears at the racetrack. So yeah, just another small thing. I wish it was just a little bit different. All right, guys, so my final complaint with the V2 here is, you know, yeah, this is a modern Ducati. It's very refined, but you can tell if you do a full teardown on this bike to put the exhaust on it and all that, you can tell that this bike is an older design. After tearing apart the V4, yeah, it's really no comparison. This thing is significantly harder to work on than a V4. Just the design language it's relatively similar, but you can tell that the V4 was a blank sheet coming off of, you know, that Audi ownership of Ducati. You can really tell that they thought things a little bit different, and they thought them out better and easier to work on. The V2 when I tore this bike apart for the exhaust, it was just a freaking nightmare. Do I regret doing it? Nope, because I love tearing my own stuff apart. I love learning the bikes. But nonetheless, I mean, this really is just a 959 at the end of the day, which is, you know, a 959 used to just be an 899 and so on and so on. They're just bikes that are essentially refined off the top of each other. So yeah, that is really the last thing that I would change and ask for is maybe an updated V2 in the future. But, you know, if they do that, they're probably going to end up charging like $20,000 for a base model. So I'd take the more affordable price point. But if they could do like an updated V2 that is more like the V4, just with the same engine, because engine's amazing, man, that would be sweet. So yeah, that really wraps it up. That is everything that I don't like about the V2. Maybe I brought up some different points that you guys haven't heard. Maybe you guys think I have no idea what I'm talking about. Whatever. Hopefully it just brings a different viewpoint for things that you don't like, do like, blah, 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 whatever. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.